Hi everyone, my name is Alexei. I'm a CTO and co-founder of a company called Datadog. And kind of to tell you okay, great. So Datadog is basically a new breed of infrastructure monitoring, and we run it as a service. So what does that mean? That means that our customers are basically software engineer, operations people. And so what I wanted to do is to tell you the story of one of our customers. His name is Jason. He works for an established web company, and he and his team by now manage hundreds of servers, and these servers basically support the business of the company. So they do a lot of stuff over the web. They need servers to run their business. Now, Jason's job, he has about 15 years of experience in the industry, and if you ask him what's changed in the past, say, 10 years, he'd say that a lot of stuff has changed. Back in the day, being in technical operations meant an occasional trip to the data center, add a couple of servers here and there. That meant maintaining a ginormous Oracle database or a couple of instances of database, and then having a Java web applications connected to it, and that was pretty much it. That was your infrastructure. So things were comparatively simple back then, and so were the monitoring needs. So to monitor this kind of infrastructure where you have one ginormous, one big database and a bunch of application servers, a couple of web servers, that was relatively simple. So you'd have one monitoring package, being free, not just Munin, or even if you pay for it, OpenView and so on. That was enough. That gave him a good overview of his infrastructure. Now, fast forward 10 years, a lot of things have changed. So in his job, in Jason's job, the three main things that have changed is, one, the company he works for now does a lot of AWS. So the new project tend to be rolled out to AWS. That means a lot more servers. That means servers that come and go all the time. Sometimes it's because it's intentional. We don't need the servers anymore, so they go. Sometimes it just happens. Servers on AWS disappear. So that's one change. The second change is that where the legacy apps are still Oracle Java based, the new stuff is a lot more complex. So Oracle's gone now. It's a lot of MySQL, for instance, or Postgres. To that you add 3 different NoSQL databases that are used concurrently, 2 caching server farms on top of the existing CDN. Java now has been partly replaced by Rails, Node.js, Scala Clojure, Python, and so on and so forth. So that's the second change. Is a lot more. The ecosystem is a lot more complex. The third change since in the last decade for the job of Jason is that software releases used to run maybe once a quarter, once a month when it was sort of an aggressive and company. Now it's once a week. Every couple of days, couple of times a day, because what's driving these software releases and these changes to the infrastructure is now multiple agile teams, software engineering teams that are pushing changes all the time. So that's what's changed. The thing that's not changed in the past 10 years for technical operations and software engineers is monitoring. And so that's a big problem, because the monitoring from 10 years ago doesn't know anything about elastic infrastructure. So servers appearing and disappearing all the time. It doesn't really know about these new apps, like Hadoop, Cassandra, Mongo, Scala, and so on and so forth. And it doesn't really work with the need to watch what's happening on infrastructure in real time. So it's very narrow. It doesn't really respond well to. It's not really meant to be looked at in real time. So I think as a result, Jason's job or this monitoring that's been cut back has left Jason in a basically to deal with a bunch of problems. And I should say this is not a picture of the actual JSON. The real JSON looks different. So too many servers, a lot of tools everywhere, just release all the time. There's a lot of complaints because stuff's changing all the time, stuff's breaking, there's a lot of blame going on, there are outages. So not having a monitoring that's kept up to date has a huge impact on the operations of on the company, and by extension on Jason's job and happiness, because he has to deal with a lot more problems than before. And so what he expressed before he came to Datadog and signed up to try our product was, I'm flying blind. Yes, I can see how my database is doing, but I have all these new applications that I have no idea what's going on. And so I need to do something. So what he realized is that he needed to basically reboot his monitoring, like get to something that would support his needs. And the stuff that worked 10 years ago basically doesn't cut it anymore. And so that's how we met him when he signed up for Datadog. And it's, I want to give a good time for the demo. So Jason signs up and he enters his credentials, and I'm not going to re-enter them, but basically going to walk you through his experience. So he signs up. The first thing he sees is this screen. So he says, this is the integrations, one of the first setup screens where you see all the applications that we support. So one of the good things that he immediately connects to is like, wow, there's a bunch of applications that I use. There's Amazon, there's Apache, there's Cassandra, there's GitHub, there's Mongo, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the stuff that I have in-house, I can connect, I can use Datadog for. I'm not going to have to set up 10 different monitoring tools to be able to have an overview of everything that's happening. That's one good thing. Second good thing is for a bunch of online services, in this case AWS, the setup is really, it's not I have to open up some documentation, write some complex configuration file and figure out how and really make it work. Now it's just enter a couple of credentials and you're in business. So that extends to a number of sources that we support. So that's great. So what that means is that there's going to be one place where Jason can look at all his performance metrics and basically do monitoring from one place. So that's set up. Now let's see what it looks like. So you do the setup, and then one of the first things you see this. Let me just make it for the past day. So you see what internally we call the Datadog stream. So it's a stream. That's something that basically presents you with the relevant updates from your infrastructure. It could be anything from code commits. So with a little bit of refresh. So code commits. It could be internal alerts. So I'm just adding them up, and you can see as I select more of the sources that we configure for this account, you can see that they start showing up in the stream. It could be particular deploys or configuration management changes. So basically, everything you connect to Datadog is going to show up here as a stream of events. You can even do stuff like we can also tell you when Amazon's down. So one way you could do is you could turn on Netflix, and when Netflix crashes, means AWS is down. There's better ways to do it. So whenever you register your AWS account to be monitored by Datadog, we'll pull their feed automatically. So we'll tell you, so as early as last week, so this week, knock on wood, everything's good. This is the kind of problems they have. And why? One thing I wanted to touch on is why do we pick a stream presentation? Why? What's the point? Well, the point is that's now a kind of interface that's very conducive to conversation, and that everybody who's used Twitter or Facebook, which is probably everybody who lives in the US and more, knows how to use. It's very intuitive. So if I say to my colleague who's in the room here, this is why we were having issues last week. He's going to get an email, and that's going to have this little snippet. So it's not. I'm not going to send an email and say, "Hey, I saw somewhere that AWS was having issues last week, but I don't remember exactly what it is," and so on. Here, it's all in context. It's all there. So the email that's going to show up on Amit's phone has the exact text. So then he can reply, and then stuff's going to show up. So if he replies in time, we'll see. But otherwise, no worries. So really, that's the first thing is get in one place relevant updates from your infrastructure. Second thing that's useful is, so I set up a number of sources, or Jason set up a number of sources, and then what else can we see? So for every kind of application that you use in your infrastructure, we create pre-configured dashboards. So that means that we give you a graphical presentation of the relevant metrics for a given application. So I'm going to pick one. Actually, I selected it. So what does that look like? So here we're looking at one particular dashboard. Let me make it a little bit smaller. It's in real time, so if you every minute it'll move ever so slightly to the left, and it gives me a number of metrics that are relevant for this particular application. So here, two things: the ability that you have to combine graphs next to one another is really important when you want to do some kind of correlation. So here, I have some kind of metrics called key cache hit rate, and it's fine, it's at 1, and I can tell you that 1 is good. And then it dips once in a while. And then as I'm mousing over, you can see on the second graph, just right of it, this seems to coincide with something happening, some other metric that's suddenly spiking. So that's how you can do correlation. And that's very important to understand relations and coupling between when you have a complex infrastructure, when something's happening on here, it might affect a component there, and it's really hard to understand unless you can see it with your own eyes. And that's the power of correlation. So of course, now I want to zoom in. I can zoom in. It's interactive and so on. So that's nothing to write home about. The other thing that we could do also is that lets us do is kind of also go back in time and discover patterns. That actually it is not something that, oh my God, there was a problem. It's something that happens, that seems to happen frequently. So every 4 hours. So this lets Jason really understand whether there's some kind of seasonality to it or whether there's some kind of accident. Now the next question is, what are these? There's some kind of markers that seems to coincide with the peaks, right? So what are they? So that's pretty easy. We can look at what they are. What they are is they're basically the relevant events that we got from the stream that map to these metrics. So here we can see that. I'm going to zoom in. You can look for in the stream that I showed you earlier, filter that by certain criteria to extract what is relevant. What are the relevant events that are happening on my infrastructure that might affect my metrics, might explain why metrics are dipping or are changing. And so in this case, what we're saying is that whenever there's this dip and this ginormous, this big sort of increase in the second graph is there's a bunch of events that are sent, and that these are events that are sent by a batch job. So then, now I understand what's happening. I have this because there's some batch job just running, and every time it flushes to the database, it actually causes activity on the system, and it's not accidental. This is something I should expect. So that's how you can extend correlation from metric to metric to metric and events. And next to last thing, I don't know how much, 2 minutes, all right. So the last thing, next to last thing I want to show is, I think extending what I mentioned earlier is if you see something in the data, because, all right, so now I understand what's happening. What should I do to share my understanding? It's very easy. Again, you take a little snapshot. You use a very social media kind of syntax. I have discovered the source of this metric jump. Let's talk about it at the next meeting. So now we're talking about hard data. There's a conversation going on. This is not like just people waving their hands. So that's after the first week. Jason's really excited. The last thing we do that I want to show is he gets this email which tells him about the recent alerts. So let me just open it to see what it has. As we're ingesting data from all the services that Jason is connected to Datadog, one thing we can also do is provide him and provide you, if you use data, with some insight into what's happening. So here we've collected the alert history over the past 6 months. So over this week, we've seen that on the infrastructure we've gotten, it's slightly better than the last week, it's -1%. But there are certain services, and we can see, I can pick one here, certain type of incidents that tend to happen. And I can even tell you by hour of the day and by day of the week what's happening. So, so with that, I think Jason's been able to reboot his monitoring, and that's kind of mission accomplished, and really understand what's happening. Now, the 3 calls to action. The first one is if you're a software engineer or in operations, you want to sign up for Datadog, so it's very easy, datadog.com. Second call of action, if you are looking for a job or if you know people who are, we are hiring, specifically in sales and in engineering. The third call of action is we have a bunch of very nice and cute T-shirts, and so people who ask questions are going to get T-shirts until we run out, and so they have a really cute logo. So if you want to get brownie points and stuff like that. That's it. Thank you. There you go.
I have really other question.
Go ahead.
So what's the pricing on this look like in terms of these are different sorts of editions and whatnot?
So the unit price is by server, because that's a unit that people that manage infrastructure understand. And so we run if I got the question correctly, which was what is the pricing?
Yes.
So it is the list price is $15 per server per month on the standard plan. Yeah.
If I've got some QoS metrics with a particular service provider,
Yeah.
do you have the ability to test against those and report non-compliance?
So yes and no. So the question is if there are some kind of external metrics, so QoS metrics of providers, can we test for those? So what we have is we have an API where you can submit the QoS metric, and then we let you set alerts on these metrics. So the thing you have to do is you have to do the measurement and send that to us, and then we'll collect it and alert you if that fails. Yep. Go ahead.
Maybe a related question, but we've done some development of some of our own middleware. How easy is it for us to plug in some of our own when we've had to kind of hand roll our own monitoring?
Yeah, so the question is, can you plug in your own middleware or your own code into Datadog? Very much so. So that we support at least 3 or 4 different ways to instrument your code, being from statsd, using Yammer metric, depending on what language you're using. Basically, you're covered. So it's a very developer-friendly monitoring tool. Yep.
Is there any management to this, or is it just all monitoring?
It is all monitoring. Yeah. One thing we do is we won't act on your infrastructure. You can ask us question, or you can have us react to, send you alerts and so on. But you'll need to connect that to something to act. Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you post notifications out by text messaging to engineers?
So can we post notifications via text? Yes, we can, but through the intermediary of PagerDuty. So they're a escalation notification service for engineers, and we plug into the API. They take care of on-call rotation, vacation, all that stuff. So we can through that. Or if you have your own email to SMS gateway, we can also use that. Yep. Do we have any international offices? We don't have offices. We do have clients all over the world, but not.
We have one office in Canada.
Oh, we have. No, sorry. So yeah. Yes.
I'm not a developer, but I was thinking if I see like all the problems, do you also give some recommendations? For example, okay, if there's this wrong, maybe you could go.
So.
This or that.
You must have taken a look at our roadmap. So basically, that's as we collecting more data, now we can train our algorithms.
Because this would be like an awesome value that I think even if you have people that are not like familiar with all the kind of stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh.
What do you do better than Splunk?
So what do we do better than Splunk? So Splunk does a great job at aggregating and analyzing logs. So that's not what we do. What we do is we see the world through two lenses. One where is sort of these high-level relevant updates, and the second is through metrics. So the thing with Splunk is that it's going to work great as long as everything you send to it is a log or looks like a log. so that works in a number of cases. There are also a number of cases, I'm thinking in the case of middleware, where you embed your instrumentation, your code. You're not necessarily going to emit a line of log, but you want to send a metric, for instance, and you want to graph it, and that's where we come in. So we work actually hand in hand with Splunk. You can also from Splunk send events to Datadog or send metric to Datadog, but it's slightly different. The kind of data we ingest is different, if you will.
So will you monitor like latency even, like
We-
ops or
Yeah. So will we monitor?
latency? Let's say for network latency or
So-
server latency.
As long as there's a way to measure it to turn it into a metric, yes. Yeah.
So along the lines of the roadmap, can you share kind of any other ways you envision this platform changing as you get to analyze more data and?
So the question is, can I share some insight into how the platforms change? So very quickly, we're a monitoring company. That's our primary use case. What we're redefining what monitoring means. And so for us, analyzing data to provide recommendation, that's one. Benchmarking, so I'm on AWS, I use this and that. How do I compare it to people who use the same kind of infrastructure? That's the second kind of usage of data. A lot more reports and a lot more analytics on how you're doing. So extracting the signal from the noise of all that your infrastructure is throwing at you, that's another key direction for us. So two more, so maybe.
I'm wondering what kind of stack you use for this application.
So,
What kind of stack do you use for this application to be able to collect?
so
all
what
this
kind of
data?
stack do we use for this application?
Yeah.
It's a Python application built in Cassandra, Redis, Postgres, Elasticsearch, S3, and a few more. But it's from data perspective, it's S3, Cassandra, Redis, Postgres. And I think we ran out of t-shirts. So.
Or you can ask more questions.
One more question.
One more question. Go
Are you
ahead.
guys using Graphite for the events?
No. The problem so are we using Graphite for the event, which is an open source graphing framework, which we love. Unfortunately, it doesn't scale to the level we want. So this is our own. Thanks. Great. Thank you very much.